Hello, and welcome to Citizen Debate. Here today with us, running for Chair A of Tooele County Commissioner, we have, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Brendan Phillips.
Justin Bake for the Libertarian Party.
Jonathan Gerard for the Constitution Party.
And we will begin our debate with an intro question. We'll start with Brendan here. And Brendan, why did you choose to run for this political position, and what is your main concern for Tooele County's future?
Well, I had a son about 4 years ago by the name of Hunter. Around that same time is when we decided to move out to Tooele County. We moved out here because the housing was affordable, and it was somewhere we could actually afford to buy a house and raise our family. Once we moved out here, and started to settle down, I realized this is a place I'm going to be living my life and spending my time, and my kids are going to go to school. I should be involved in my community. So at that time, I decided I was going to join a board. I joined the Tooele County Historic Preservation Board. I tried to get more involved in my community. I found the Green Party aligned with my ideology, so I started volunteering for the Green Party. And I recognized that if I wanted to make any sort of changes in the government, I needed to do that on the most local of levels, in the place where I lived. So I decided to run for county commission.
Fantastic.
The follow-up question of what my vision for Tooele County would be. I would hope to maintain the way of life in Tooele County, maintain the rural way of life, the family atmosphere, the open space, and keep our taxes low.
That's a goal I can definitely agree with. Justin, would you please be next?
Yes. So I decided to run. I was actually probably the first person to file. I had been working with the Libertarian Party a little bit prior to this, mainly with federal offices. I helped out a little bit in Gary Johnson's presidential campaign, as well as moving on to Craig Bowden's Senate campaign in its early stages. I was really focused on federal issues. I then became the secretary of the Utah Libertarian Party, as the former secretary had to step down due to health concerns. So I took over that position, and we were really working to get candidates to run in pretty much every race we could. The beautiful thing is we have major party status in the state of Utah, so we don't have to petition the government anymore to run for elected positions. So in doing that, encouraging everybody else to run for local positions, I thought I'd lead by example and decided to run for myself. Little did I know that there was so much going on in Tooele County. I really lost my focus on Tooele, and it's just a mess.
When you say mess, can you be more specific? What disturbs you the most about that mess?
I don't even know where to begin.
Fair enough.
It's really bad. I mean, we have these gravel pits coming in. A lot of the citizens are concerned because, as far as they can determine, they were issued on temporary permits and so on. We have that concern. We have the commissioners just giving themselves raises because they can. That's great. Not really. While at the same time, in the same meeting, telling the sheriffs that are probably the least well-paid law enforcement agency in the state, that they can't have just a simple cost of living adjustment. But they can give themselves a huge raise. So I mean, there's a ton going on. I'm going to divulge into every little thing, but those are really my concerns. I would hope to clean up the county a little bit in some of its practices. The county ordinances, as I've been going through them, are in sections contradicting each other, and other sections contradicting what the legislature says the county can do. And there have been several cases where they've tried to pass bills within the campaigning period, or pass resolutions, I should say, within the campaigning period that directly contradict the legislature.
Okay, and Jonathan, can you give us your intro, please?
Yes. So a few years ago, quite a few years ago, I was a scoutmaster, and we went to a big old jamboree here in town, and Tooele County had another one planned. And what happened was our county commissioners that was there at the time actually wanted to stop raves from happening. And so they passed a law here that people over a group of 100 could not assemble together. And so it nixed out the Boy Scouts there. So I got the boys to actually write letters to our county commissioners and talk to them about the Constitution and the right to freely assemble. And we made some traction there. But I've been a lifelong resident here in Tooele County, and I've been involved throughout that time. I go to the county commissioner meetings when there's something on the agenda that's in my neck of the woods. And I'm concerned. I'm one of those everyday average citizens that's there listening. I'm digesting what they're telling me. They say, hey, you just need to show up at this meeting. I go to that meeting. And then they tell you, well, you need to do this a little bit earlier. So I ask them what the next thing is. I go to that one. And it keeps on getting passed along here, 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 and there. And it gets really confusing. However, because I'm involved, I like to sit there and really get the minutes of the meeting. I like to get the paperwork there. I like to read through it. I like to see what's going on and see lawness-wise if they're actually following the law. Tooele County hasn't been following the law in every instance. I've seen it numerous times. And when I bring it up in the meetings, they just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, we've already committed to this, so we'll just let it go this time. But next time we'll be more persistent on actually following the law. A few people asked me to run for office. It's not something that I really want to jump right into type thing. If you go up there and you hear everybody yelling and screaming at the county commissioners, it's like, are you crazy? Did you get in there type thing? But I also understand that I live here and I don't want to see my community changed. So I'm willing to step up to the plate. So I said that I would do it. And one of my main concerns is just how free we've gotten in our way. Like, we used to have a very specific pattern for the county, like our zoning laws. Our zoning laws were very specific for each individual area. They told you what you could have, what you couldn't have type thing. And we've been moving away from that as we've been trying to accommodate some of the big growth from Salt Lake County coming out this way for that commuter type lifestyle. And it's been interesting to see that as they keep on adopting verbiage from over on the other side of the mountain into our codes, and it changes our lifestyle here. And so I want my kids to grow up with the same type of background, lifestyle that I had, which meant that we got to run around a little bit on the mountains. We got to have fun. We got to learn things. And we didn't get yelled at for actually being kids.
Yeah, the new term for that is what? Free-range children? Yeah, that's an interesting story because when I see governments try to create laws to specifically isolate and persecute one group of persons, like you said, the ravers were who they were targeting.
Yes.
And that butterfly effect just rippled right out, and now the Boy Scouts can't have a jamboree. That is a crazy story. All right, well, thank you for the intros. Now we're going to start with a question. This question is from Shannon from a Facebook post, and here it goes. Where do you stand on protection for the community, personal property, and their persons? If there was a way to add security for the residents of the county, would you consider it? So this is your boys in blue question. How do you feel about the law enforcement issues going on here in Tooele? And we'll start with you, Brendan.
All right, I will start this one off cool. I believe that Tooele County is huge. We have a large area to cover, and we don't have sufficient deputies to do it. And we see that. We see a lot of burglaries, and we see a lot of break-ins. And, you know, our sheriffs, they're not paid a sufficient wage, and we don't have enough of them. And we need more sheriffs to better police this county and protect people's personal property. That sums it up.
So you're for an increase in law enforcement?
Absolutely.
Numbers. Okay.
Absolutely. I would also add to that I would like to see a shift in how our law enforcement are used. And I think we need a change in the culture of the police department. Now, actually, I think in Tooele we have a really good sheriff's department. You don't hear a lot of terrible stuff about the Tooele County Sheriff's Department.
I've only heard good things about Sheriff Wimmer.
I have too. So I can't say a lot of bad stuff. But I know that when I looked at our Tooele County budget, one of the things that really caught my eye was spending on our jail. And it's one of the largest line items in our budget is spending on our inmates. And we were talking about this earlier. You know, I don't believe that those jailed for the safe possession of marijuana should be there. I think it's a drain on public resources and tax dollars.
Oh, definitely. I agree. Justin?
Well, in regards to public safety, Brennan is very much correct in the fact that we don't have a lot of deputies available. I worked at the sheriff's office for about a year and a half as the evidence technician. There would typically be only about 4 deputies on duty for patrol at a time. And I would say I think about 6 or 8 people in the jail. I'm not too sure about that because I wasn't in the jail too often. You don't really see them because they're usually up in the nests and stuff. When I say that, I mean like the overview of the pods. So that's pretty much any given time. I feel that a lot of time is wasted with regards to patrol. Just because there's so much to do and there's so much area to cover. We're one of the biggest counties in the state. The West Desert's pretty much abandoned, so I mean a lot of that gets cut out. Most of the time there's usually 3 deputies in Stansbury and then a deputy in Wendover because the split there is so massive that you can't get a deputy, to Wendover in a timely manner, so they just keep one there. Or they assign one there and they usually do a daily commute. In the southern part of the county there's basically no patrol because Stansbury Park is so huge and it's unincorporated, so it doesn't have its own police department. I would also say that in regards to the jail and its population issues, a lot of the problem with the jail was that the grant money was allocated in a way that didn't allow them to take people from Salt Lake. That was the plan to pay for it, was them taking people from Salt Lake and basically billing out to Salt Lake the space. That's gone away now because from my understanding, they were able to work with the wording there and bring in detainees from ICE as well as some of the federal detainees and use that as a temporary holding facility. So the population went from about 90-ish people in a 300-person facility to, I believe it's now over capacity again. But I would say that we need to not focus so much on nonviolent offenders and really do a good job at dealing with those burglaries and thefts. The things that actually are violent crimes in a way.
Violations of property rights are a big deal in society. I take those very seriously. Problem though with the burglaries and the thefts, from my perspective, is police don't arrive until after the theft and the burglary has occurred, and that's usually to pick up the brass shells or draw the chalk outline if it goes in a rather negative direction.
Correct.
But, absolutely.
Yeah, I would encourage people to be prepared to defend themselves, especially if they're in the southern section of the county, because the response times, no matter how good, coming from Stansbury are going to be rather slow.
Jonathan.
So our sheriffs have done a good job throughout the years. I remember Frank Park. He did a great job being a sheriff and actually managing his resources. Paul Wimmer has been doing the same thing, and it's been really good there. But with the protection, if you're trying to protect yourself, there has to be something where we as individuals actually take that right back. We're responsible for our property. We're responsible for our things. We're responsible to actually go and talk to our neighbors when there's an issue. I know that in today's world where social media seems to make us all more social, we seem to be a little bit more antisocial, and we won't go knock on the door and say, hey, did you know that your animal is actually getting out of bounds, like breaking through the fence and things? Is there something that we can work on as a solution, so that we could alleviate a lot of that stress on the police system if we could just sit there and actually be good, kind, caring people again? And that also builds a sense of community. If we have that relationship with people, it's going to build our community up, that we're going to benefit from that, and people will see that. It'll actually cause more people to come here, be attracted. I will caution that the more that we do our developments here, as we look at the type of developments that we're putting in, certain ones actually consolidate the residential areas, and when they do that, it seems like crime increases in those areas, as well as if you're in a rural area where there's not a lot of people, then people aren't really watching out for you. So I think there's a combination of a lot of different things going on there. I encourage people to get their own security systems, just on their personal side, and take care of what they can, and then the things that they're not able to contact the law enforcement, where they're the ones that are over that. Paul Wimmer is over that. So.
Right, and like you said, just knowing your neighbors, if you have them on your text. I know I've been in a situation a few years ago where I texted my neighbors, and they were looking out for my best interests and making sure nothing was going on with the house when there was a potential for a criminal activity to occur. They were ready and armed and willing to help my wife when she was in need. And that's very important in any community. I always encourage people to get to know your neighbors. Even if they're not the most pleasant people, get to know each other, because we do rely on each other. Out here in Tooele, we are a country folks, and we do need to be communicating with each other, especially if we're living next door. I couldn't agree with you more.
In Salt Lake, they have ride-alongs with some of the police officers for the residents to do. And it's opened up their eyes to see actually what's going on in the middle of the night type thing when they do a ride along, and they can see what they actually run into and what to be aware of. So, if you have a community watch program and things like that, that would be great as well.
Yeah, citizens taking their own initiative is the most effective and cheapest way to do it. Okay, next question. So this is one that I wrote myself. Where do you stand on gun rights, and do you feel open carry laws go too far in Utah or not far enough? So this kind of rides on the back of that previous question. Go ahead, Brenna.
All right. I absolutely support your right to bear arms. I am not an advocate for more gun control. If I know one thing, I know that prohibition doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked with alcohol. It hasn't worked with drugs. What happens when we make something illegal and we prohibit it is we turn it to the black market. We put it in the hands of criminals, and we don't need to do that with guns. People have a right to bear arms, and they should maintain that right, especially in a world where, with 3D printing now, people can print their own firearms. Prohibition is just not a means of controlling violence. We need to deal with systemic violence in our societies, which is it's about humans, truly. It's not about guns. Open carry laws, I support. I think people should have a right to carry their weapons. As far as if it's far enough now, yes, I think what we have now is good. People can carry their weapons. They can't carry them into schools or, public buildings, but they can carry them on their hip pretty much everywhere else, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Justin?
for sure.
In regards to open carry and gun rights, I would say I'm a firm advocate for gun rights. I think, and it's a controversial subject, but I would probably be willing to see the repeal of the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act. That would be an extension of gun rights. I believe needs to happen. But another thing that we see with open carry, specifically, I don't necessarily like open carry, and not because I don't believe in gun rights. I just believe it's a stupid idea because now you know who's armed. I would be more of an advocate for constitutional carry, which is constitutional concealed carry, which would be, in my opinion, a lot more effective and lead to a lot less accidents. So that's where I'd be on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Jonathan?
So,
Let's point the mic just a little bit more. There we go.
according to the United States Constitution, so this is the federal level, we have the right to bear arms. And that's where we stand as a Constitution Party. That's where I stand. Our guns are there for our protection from various sources. If there's somebody that is coming into my home to inflict harm on me, I want to be able to protect myself. There was other protections that was set up underneath the Constitution as well for the right for bear arms. And if you'd like to learn about those, you can read about them in the Declaration of Independence. As for open carry, I think open carry is great. I think that concealed carry is also good. I don't like it when we sit there and we actually broadcast to somebody that we're not going to have any guns in this location, because I think that makes it an easy target. We've seen in the news and in the media all over the place where those places are targeted. People come in, they know they're not going to get any resistance from somebody there, and usually we end up with a lot of casualties in that regard. So, yeah, I'm for the Second Amendment, and pretty cut and dry right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think the people that broadcast that they're not armed are failing the IQ test for civil society, but it is a free world, right? Thank God. So the next question is from Mike on Facebook. Mike asks, do you feel that developers are bullying their way to the changes in county laws at the expense of citizen safety and communities' well-being? Examples, the gravel pit. The gravel pit's a big issue right now. And I will start with you, Brennan. Can you
All right.
answer that?
Yes, I could answer that. I do believe that. I believe that that's actually a big problem in our society is corporate bullying. They have more access to money. They have more access to lawyers than we do. And when they want something, they put their resources into getting it. And us as a community, it's really hard to protect ourselves. That's why we have county commissioners. We elected these people to be our voice in this situation and to protect us. And most of us don't feel that that's going on. And I think the way that we see bullying happen is with lawsuits. You know, and a lot of times the county acts in fear of lawsuits. So, you know, they want to coddle these developers so that because out of fear of a lawsuit, you know. And I think that they let themselves be bullied, and by extension, they let their community be bullied. And what I hear a lot from people that I talk to is that they feel like our county commissioners represent these developers and not our community. And whether that's true or not, that is how our community feels. And then our commissioners need to recognize that and do something about it so that our people cannot feel like they're being bullied, like they don't, you know, or they're not being cut out of the loop. Absolutely. I think corporate bullying is a problem in Tooele and everywhere in this world.
Justin?
I would agree with that sentiment. I believe that when we have these developers come in, a lot of times agreements are made, and they're not held up in any light. For example, the situation's happening South Rim, which is the gravel pit that I believe he's referring to. That situation was one where the residents were promised that the pit that was there and in existence was only there for the development of the community, and that once the community had finished its development, or at least its gravel needs for the development, that it would be shut down permanently. Now, to me, I believe that is a somewhat fraudulent thing to do, is say one thing and yet do another. When you're promising when you're promising a customer, in this case the residents of South Rim, that you're going to shut down a gravel pit, and then you knowingly sell it to a person that does nothing but develop gravel pits, that is a fraud, at least to me. I know that's not the strictest definition of fraud, but
No, I agree.
I believe that would be what we as libertarians call a NAP violation, which is a violation of the non-aggression principle.
Keep your contracts.
Yeah, basically keep your contracts. The only real crime in the world is crimes where people are hurt, either forcibly, violently, or by deception or fraud. So.
Great answer. Jonathan.
I do believe that the developers are bullying the county with threats of lawsuit, as well as our county leaders and appointed positions and our county planners have actually participated in that bullying as well. They go along with it. I've sat in on the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, and I've sat there and I've watched our elected leaders or our appointed leaders, and I've watched our planners that we have hired sit there and seem to almost serve them up with a gold platter anything that they ask for. I think there's more accountability than just on the developers. But I have watched on the developers' end that if they don't get their way, they'll write into their contracts or their terms that, hey, we're going to seek litigation in this type thing. And so yes, I've seen them bullying. And how do we stop that? Well, we need to sit there and first of all talk to our county planners and say, hey, we are here to represent the people. Just remind them who we're to represent. When we appoint the planning and zoning commissioners, we need to let them know who we represent there too. There is some with the property rights. Of course, somebody wants to come in and develop some land. There's a proper process to go there, but we don't need to make special rules or circumstances for them to do versus, say, somebody that has 3 acres versus somebody that has 150 acres and they want to develop. They
Right.
should be the same across the board.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably lots of favoritism toward the larger developments, but also in I'm going to say this, in the commissioner's corner, when you have those large corporations, like you're saying, they have the money, they have the resources, they have the lawyers. When you're going up against those people, and you're just a county commissioner, I mean, granted, I don't blame them for being intimidated, especially with what happened with the previous lawsuit in Tooele. I mean, we got handed pretty hard.
Talking on Overlake,
Well, the what is it? The $21 million that we're now indebted as citizens to pay in that lawsuit. It's probably going to ruffle some feathers and scare some people into submission, I would imagine. And the law is huge. It's voluminous. It's how do you even navigate that as a commissioner? I'll tell you, if one of you guys get in and you have to face the law, it's very, very in depth, very detailed. It would intimidate me too. So I do have to say that. And those people, like Brendan said, they have money, they have lawyers, and us as citizens. So, yeah.
that's where we need the expertise of the citizens here in Tooele County. You guys all have your own specialties. I know that people are in the law. There's lawyers out there. There's land developers. There's real estate agents. There's people that have specialties in each of these different areas, and they can help us navigate the law. We just need to take the time to listen to them and hear what they're saying.
Well, again, community effective communication and working together. That seems to be the path forward. Okay, so our next question came into me through an email, and it goes like this. What will you do to drive business and economic growth inside of the county? Is it appropriate to provide certain businesses with tax incentives? If so, please describe what type and why. Brennan.
All right. So I think a big hindrance to economic development in Tooele County is our traffic infrastructure, our roadways, and our public transportation. Anyone who's commuted to and from Tooele to Salt Lake knows that our roadways are almost inoperable during rush hour. The Lake Point Junction, when something happens, everything shuts down. And I feel it's a big hindrance on our county not being adequately connected to the rest of the state. I think it stifles economic growth. I think it stifles economic opportunity coming from outside of our county. I also think we need to be adequately connected via public transportation, which would help.
I agree.
As far as tax incentives for corporations to move out here, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of it. I think corporations have lots of money and lots of lawyers, like I said. And I gotta be honest, I'm not a great fan of giving them more tax breaks and more incentives. I feel like they get plenty from us as it is. But I understand that we want to encourage them to come to Tooele County so we can, bring in taxable revenue and stuff. But when we start playing this game of counties, competing to bring in businesses, I think we all inevitably suffer because we let, again, the corporate developers have the say.
Right.
And so, I'm not a big fan on tax incentives. Perhaps there's a model where that could work, but I'm certainly skeptical.
Yeah, like you said, it definitely is a violation of some sort of a core value to put one person above another in terms of favoritism. And that doesn't seem like the American way. I can definitely see your point of view. Justin?
Tooele's sort of in a catch-22. And the reason I say that is, like you were saying, the transportation doesn't exist, but the transportation can't exist due to the fact that there's not enough people to raise the money to get the transportation here. So I think we really need to focus less on attracting mega corporations to come out here and set up another call center in the valley. We have enough call centers in Salt Lake Valley. What we really need to focus on, I believe, is small businesses. We find ourselves in the situation where it's difficult to name a single locally owned business here. It's difficult. I mean, other than the few, like Mexican restaurants in the valley, name one that isn't owned by a big monopoly or
Can you
a
have
big
too
corporation.
many Mexican restaurants in Tooele?
I think that's possible, but we'll let the laws of supply and demand deal with that. What I would say is that companies such as Applebee's and McDonald's get an advantage here. And it's not an advantage because of tax incentives. It's an advantage because they're the only ones that can deal with the regulatory overhead. There was a bill passed, SB 158, I think was the update to it, that was to allow small home businesses to be able to operate without a business license. Or if there was a license, no fees or conditions would be applied to the license. And the idea behind that was to spur economic growth through these small businesses. Apple started in a garage. Microsoft started in a garage. I believe that Boeing also started in a garage. All of these places start out as home businesses with some guy and a dream. And we really need to encourage that instead of saying, oh, let's build a building for Teleperformance. And Teleperformance doesn't want to build here because there's not enough people anyway. We need to really attract local businesses. Local businesses will attract a workforce eventually. And then we can worry about the big fish.
So you would use a tax incentive to try to lure in more local businesses, or
no
not?
Tax incentive. Just reduce the regulatory overhead. Allow businesses to prosper. Allow small home businesses to be small home businesses, and don't try to make the business person be a lawyer at everything. Like you said, there's too many lawyers in this world. We really need to focus on being able to navigate our law and our regulations in the county in such a way that you can start and manage your business with very little thought involved in, I need to do this document, I need to deal with this, I need to pay this licensing fee, I need to remember to, send this particular tax person this particular form. We really need to get rid of a lot of that overhead because most people that are willing to start a business, they start and then they start getting into the regulatory aspect of starting their business and they stop. It's a hopeless endeavor for them, and we need to get rid of that. McDonald's can come out here because they have lawyers to manage those regulatory requirements. Applebee's can come here because they have lawyers to manage those regulatory requirements. A lot of businesses try to start and they can't start here. Food trucks, for example, are great. They just got food truck reciprocity, so if one health department in one county allows it, they allow it in all counties. Well, have you noticed there's more food trucks around here all of a sudden?
Oh, I have.
And it's because they no longer have to go through the Tooele Health Department. They can go into Salt Lake, and Salt Lake has a better process because they can say, this is what you need, here's a checklist, instead of saying ambiguity, Just, here's some paperwork, you read it, sort it all out, and tell me what you think, They don't do that over there, and that's why most of the food trucks that come out to Tooele County are actually licensed in Salt Lake.
Yeah. I used to run a food type business out of a cottage industry law here in Tooele for chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to use alcohol in one of my recipes, the alcohol filled chocolates. But they wanted me to get an alcohol license.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah.
Good
so
luck.
so I definitely
That's
feel
a whole.
your pain.
That's not even county level. That's state level.
And I completely 100% agree with you on that. There's too much bureaucracy in the food department. That is for sure.
Well, it's not even food. It's everything. I mean, I wanted to start an IT business, and I started going through the paperwork, and I said, "Wow, this is pretty much a hopeless endeavor." And that's one of the easier businesses because they don't know how to regulate it. But the amount of overhead I'd have to put in, I'd have to hire an accountant because the taxes would be insane to calculate, and stuff like that. It's difficult.
Jonathan.
So I have a personal friend who lives down in Lake Point, and he has a daughter that decided that she wanted to do a little snow cone shack type thing, hut, just there on their property. This was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and so they wanted to do everything all kosher with those regulations that you were talking about. And so they had to actually go up to Tooele County and ask them for a food handler's permit by any means. It's shaved ice with some syrup in it, but it's okay. They need that. And they also needed to sit there and have insurances in place and everything and spend the fee so that they could review all their documentation. If I remember right, it was like $100 fee at the time. And they did all of these things. They set up their little shack on the corner of their property there. And then they had the health department or one of the departments come out and actually say, it's too close to the road. You need to move it back 20 feet from the property line, which makes it pretty much inaccessible to anybody that was there. And so there's a small business, a young lady that was just trying to get started, doing something. It was kind of just more of a hobby. You see the kids with the lemonade stands, and
They're all getting
they need to be
arrested.
regulated, right? Make sure that lemonade is good, and they
Yeah.
put the proper amount of sugar, and they have labels and nutritional servings and everything else on that. You were talking, Brendan, about the infrastructure here, and yes, our infrastructure is lacking. We keep on wanting to put all these houses in the main corridor that goes to Salt Lake. We have Kennecott looking at some land at the Adobe Rock, putting in 4,700 homes there. We have Christopher Robinson putting in 2,600 homes up above the railroad tracks in his Saddleback agreement. We have out there in Erda, I think close to 4,000 homes going in there. Those are going to clog up the only arteries that would provide that infrastructure there. And so we need to be forward thinking on that. We need to sit there and start planning more than just a highway out here. We need to be planning for an eventual belt route type freeway where we have overpasses to alleviate the flow of traffic. But on the flip side of that, I don't want people to go commuting out there to Salt Lake County. I want them to stay here in Tooele. And so we need to find businesses here that would provide a living wage, not just a minimum wage or anything, a living wage, a business that could handle that. Years ago, when I was a kid, my mom was working at Tooele Army Depot. It was providing a living wage for a group of people here in Tooele, and that's what made Tooele the city that it was. Now that TAD has slowed down a lot and they don't have near the staff there, people started commuting to Salt Lake, and then we were found out and people started moving out here to commute to Salt Lake because they're looking for that living wage. We need to actually look at people being able to work from home. And we have the infrastructure here already in place. We have some wonderful internet companies that provide fiber throughout the Tooele Valley. We have a lot of resources here that would make it economical for people to do that, and it would provide a living wage, and it would alleviate that stress on that daily commute. So,
I definitely agree with the fiber. Gosh, in Salt Lake City, they have that Google fiber. They're providing 1,000 megabytes for $70 a month. That kind of infrastructure just
Here it's where Beehive provides it. It's a gigabyte, 1,000 megabytes, megabits per second, for $99.99, and 100 meg
did I
for.
say? I'm sorry, I meant they're giving 1,000 gigabytes, aren't they?
No, fiber
Something-
can't do that.
No, okay.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's 1,000
like
megabytes
10
then?
gigs maybe if you're a business.
Right.
Yeah, no, that you couldn't be able to do
Google
that off
Fiber.
the exchange. Yeah, no, I'm familiar.
Okay.
I work in IT. No.
But it definitely improves our opportunities to work from home as citizens.
Oh, absolutely.
In Tooele, if we can get a better internet structure and more providers, absolutely.
Oh, I love it. I'm able to work from home occasionally, and it really helps not having an hour and a half commute.
especially when
Unfortunately,
there's an accident.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's a occasional thing, not a everyday thing for me. But dang it, they just need to make it.
Must be
Just need to
nice.
make it so I can do that.
All right. Well, that was a great answer, Jonathan. Brought up a lot of good points. So our next question is from another Michael on Facebook, a different Michael. I'm not reading out last names, but this question goes like this. Do you have any plans to reduce spending at the county level to alleviate the tax burden on county residents? And I'll start with you, Brandon.
All right. So that's a loaded question. There's a lot to think about there. One of the things I would mention too, I alluded to earlier, was our jail and the spending that we do in our jail, and it's a huge amount of spending that we do. Something else I would like to talk about that Jonathan alluded to is a living wage, and that's kind of outside the scope of the commissioner. But I really feel like if we had a living wage, that would actually bring in more tax revenue to the county and help alleviate some of those concerns. Also, I think if I was on the commission, I would employ a similar tactic to what I used in the Green Party. When I was on the coordinating committee of the Green Party, we approve all of the expenditures that come through the party. And to be honest, when you're in the Green Party, a lot of people are willing to just spend money on whatever, unfortunately. So I was always the guy who had to be super critical of every expense that came through. And every time an expense came to our table, I was like, whoa, you know. And I had to take a long, critical, hard look at every expense. And I think that's, going to be kind of the role of our commissioners, is to take a long, hard look at how we're spending our money. And that's a really difficult thing to do. I've looked at that budget, and it's massive. And there's so many different areas to look at. But I think our commissioners, and we need to collectively sit down and think about that. There's a lot of things that we can do to cut back. And I don't see a lot of reasons we should have to cut up.
Justin?
I would say with the jail, unfortunately, there's nowhere to cut because that's a bond, so it's done. We're paying it off. Unfortunately, that decision was made a while back. I would say there's not much I can think of cutting. Hopefully, when we reduce the regulatory overhead, if we were able to reduce the regulatory overhead for my plan, we'd be able to reduce a lot of the administrative cost of that. I would say the number one thing that hurts the county is the fact that a lot of purchases are made outside of the county. The county is pretty much fueled almost exclusively off of property and sales taxes. I would encourage a reduction in property tax if possible and a reduction in sales tax if possible. But unfortunately, that's how things are paid for, and unfortunately, we've acquired quite a bit of debt that we have to pay. So one thing we could do is by encouraging people to be local and these small businesses that are apparently hard to operate, hopefully that would bring in a lot of tax revenue, and that revenue would help us. I think that the selling of the complex, the racetrack complex, Deseret Peak, is going to help us a lot because it's going to get rid of our overhead of it and put it onto a business that would like to take it. And the beautiful thing is there, any business that would take it would have an incentive to make a profit off of it. And by doing so, there'd be events out here. I was speaking to a gentleman earlier, and let me get his name. I was speaking to him at RC Willie, actually. I ran into him, and we had a long discussion about this. Alan, he works at RC Willie. I'm not going to put his last name out there, but he's this Hawaiian dude. Goes Hawaiian style all the time. He'll probably appreciate that, I hope. And we had a long discussion about the idea that we could have a lot of money come in by tourism. You have Park City, which makes a great deal of its money off of tourism, but with the racetrack out here, with events hopefully happening every weekend, due to a business owning it and wanting to make a profit, they're gonna book that thing out every weekend. Hopefully, that would attract a lot of money coming in, with people not staying here and using the infrastructure permanently. And I hope that would help balance the books.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the racetrack does need to be owned by private hands and not government hands. I know when I go there, it's usually dead. If I just go to eat at the Brazilian restaurant, it seems like it's a vacant place. Yeah. It's kind of scary if you think about it. I mean,
and we're paying for it. We're paying every dime.
And we could be profiting from that. Jonathan.
So reducing spending is something that is dear to my heart type thing. I've been talking about it for a long time. With taxes, property taxes in particular, I would like to see here in Tooele County that we would actually, at the time of purchasing a home, we freeze the property taxes for that individual. And then if they choose to resell that home at a later date, or if they're not occupying it, like meaning they're renting it to somebody else, then they would be reassessed for a new property tax value. This would help our older widowers and our fixed income people and our low income people, because now they know exactly what they owe type thing in that regard. How do we do that? Well, there's a few different ways that we can do that. We need to alleviate some of the tax burdens by basically trimming our waste. We sit there and we have entered into contracts and we have taken facilities. The government, it's outside their scope. The racetrack, Deseret Peak Complex. We have private swimming recreation areas that can't open up because the community subsidizes a swimming pool. And so it's not profitable to them, and so we lose those type businesses. And there are people that would be willing to pay for them, but because we subsidize it, everybody goes to the subsidized businesses in that regard. So yes, alleviate some of the tax burdens there. I talked to people that have even been divorced and they're on a fixed income, a one income family. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started this that a lot of people here in Tooele County have to have a couple of jobs in their household just to keep afloat. When you sit there and you take out one of those bread earners and they're trying to go to school to earn a little bit more with their job capabilities, you have some trouble there. And so if you knew a fixed income and knew that not every November when your property tax came due that it was going to go up another $100, $200, $300 every year or every 5 years.
Yep.
That would be really nice and beneficial. People would stay here in Tooele County a lot longer if that was in place. And as such, people would gain a respect and build that community type feeling that we want. They would take ownership of our community at that point.
Right, they'd have more control of their lives. I know myself when I put my mortgage on a automatic payment, and I know last time when they raised the taxes, I came due on a late payment or some sort of a delinquency on my mortgage. And if it happened to me, I know it must have happened to many other people. So I would say that whoever is elected county commissioner, please consider that idea. I think that is a fantastic idea, and it would help a lot of senior citizens on Social Security. And yeah, it's a great idea. I applaud you on that one.
Can I chime in here? That was actually something we were discussing when I was at the parade in Lake Point. I was looking around and I'm going like, they're building $400,000 and $500,000 homes just over there. These guys must have absolutely the worst tax adjustments ever, because you have these $400,000 or $500,000 homes going up right next to this guy that's lived there for 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden his property taxes are going up tenfold. It's kind of like the problem that happened in
Park City.
Park City had that issue, but San Bernardino really had that issue.
Yes.
Where all of a sudden all of the houses, no matter what size they were $1 million homes, and nobody could afford their property taxes.
Yeah.
They drove out the lifelong residents.
Yeah.
And that happened to me where I lived in New York. I used to live in upstate New York, and the people from the city would come in, purchase that property. They'd reassess the value, and up it goes. And before you know it, all the locals had to sell. And that's a good point. And with California, everyone's fleeing the government there and coming to Utah. At least a good majority of them are. And that is going to be one of the consequences that we have unless we put in a plan of action, like you were talking about. Right.
And if you're from California and you're renting, just please learn what property prices are going around here, because if you guys keep increasing the bid.
So our next question is from Thomas on Facebook. Thomas says, with massive influx of new population, which what we were just talking about, what will your plans be to better manage traffic issues to and from Salt Lake City? So here's our transportation question. And I'll just throw this out there before you guys answer. We do not have a bus route on Saturday or Sunday, and I know that's not the commissioner's jurisdiction. It is UTA, but it's something to definitely consider as commissioner candidates. Go ahead, Brendan.
All right, so we've kind of talked about this a little bit already. This is one of the biggest issues facing our county, is the lack of traffic infrastructure. We really need to get to work with UDOT on getting this addressed. It's so important. And we recently approved the Mid-Valley Highway, which is going to be getting construction, which does very little to alleviate these concerns, actually. What it does do is it creates traffic flow to the motorsports park, so we can hopefully have more opportunity for growth in that area and income. But we're not doing anything with that highway to address our bottleneck at Lake Point. And it's a major, major concern that absolutely needs to be addressed. We need a second alternative route to Salt Lake City, whether that's an extension of 201, something of the sorts. You also mentioned public transportation. We need some level of transportation out here to get to and from the city. That would help alleviate some of these traffic concerns as well. UTA, it seems, has repeatedly told us there's not enough people. There's not enough support for it. I don't know how true that is or if I believe that, but I think that there should be a means of getting a basic service, whether that's provided through UTA or hell, maybe we do it ourselves. I just said hell, I'm sorry. But, we got to do something.
It's all right, I got the air conditioning on.
Oh, it's a little warm up here. But it's absolutely one of the biggest concerns that we need to address, and it needs to be addressed immediately. And I feel as if we may have missed an opportunity by addressing the Mid-Valley Highway first. I understand the necessity for it, but it wouldn't have been the first thing on my plate.
Thank you. Justin?
Well, I'm a libertarian, so I say privatize the roads. No, I'm just kidding. Not all roads need to be privatized, obviously. I say that as a quip because my next answer is going to be a private road. The county has looked into time and time again the idea of connecting a tunnel from Tooele directly into the Draper-Murray area. I know a ton of commuters that work out in Draper, work out in Murray, work out in Sandy. So we could alleviate some traffic that way too. So what I would propose is a Hail Mary where we where we essentially just text Elon Musk and say, "Hey, do you want to build another tunnel?" Not being serious though, I do believe that we should engage and see if there would be a private company that would be willing to build that tunnel. It's been suggested, and it would alleviate traffic, and it will alleviate traffic heavily because now instead of putting even more traffic through that bottleneck, which is I-80 at Lake Point, you start readdressing some of that traffic away from that area. We could also look into the possibility of having a direct route that's better to Utah County as well. I occasionally, if there's an accident, I live in Stockton and I work in Draper. So it's sixes whether I go the interstate or whether I go around. I believe it's 73 through Lehigh. So if there's I'll basically pull up Waze and just whatever way it lands that day, that's the way I'll go. So I believe we really need to alleviate traffic. The only realistic way of doing so is creating a new path, not just adding on to the path that already exists.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Since I live in Lake Point, this is an issue that I see every day type thing. I've watched people cut through our town every time there's an accident on the highway. Depending on where it's at, they cut through the town and try and get onto the freeway a little bit quicker that way. I've thought about it a lot, and I see a solution that I've suggested at some of the meetings. That I've suggested it to UDOT. I've suggested it to our county commissioners and our planning and zoning. But that is, there's a road over by the Tractor Supply that's a gravel road that actually they used when they were paving the freeway there. And it goes right out to the freeway. They put an interchange there, and that becomes the new entrance to the freeway to go into Salt Lake. Where the entrance is right now there at that pinch point, that becomes the on-ramp to 201, meaning there's not a way to get on to the freeway at that point. So that makes somebody have to decide a little bit farther back, because I've noticed that the accidents that happen is between exit 99 and 201, where it separates. And it's because people are moving in and out. I drive that traffic all the time, every morning in my commute, and people are darting in and out through there trying to get in, and somebody's not paying attention, they slam into somebody else. And so basically there's enough room right there that we could put 2 more lanes that would feed for 201, and then just change the entrance onto the freeway right there. That would alleviate the going to work traffic. Coming back would take a little bit more effort on that, because then you're looking at a viaduct or a bridge of some sort that you're going to be adding. But I will mention this as well. If you do this suggestion that I'm saying, that Flying J and the Travel America that's right there, they can still get off the freeway right there. They just have to get onto 201 and then cut over on the Salt Air. I don't remember the road number on Salt Air, but they can cut back over to the freeway that way. And then it also, those big trucks, those big semi-rigs pull out, and they're doing about 20 or 30 when they start to pick up speed, and we have people doing 60 on the highway there, and they end up causing accidents there. So that would alleviate that as well.
There seems to be an accident every day I come back from Salt Lake City in rush hour.
So you're causing that? No.
Maybe.
Or at least you get to experience it, which isn't ever any fun.
Correlation versus causation.
Yeah.
So our next question is from Kelly Ewing. on Facebook. Our question goes like this: as more people migrate to our county, how do you plan on tackling the water scarcity issue for Tooele County's future growth? And I'll start with you, Brendan.
All right. This is also a major issue. As we all know, we've been in a pretty severe drought out here, and our water levels are actually pretty low. Yet, we're approving all of this massive new growth without knowing for sure that we can even accommodate it in the water. And I would say that, Tooele County and all of our county offices and our county buildings need to consider xeriscaping. Now, that's a very small thing that we can do. But we have to take efforts to conserve water. We have to take more efforts to manage our water. And a large part of doing that is managing growth. So we have to manage our growth within our means of water. Another great concern I have for our water systems is the cleanliness of our water. Now, I've been told that supposedly Stansbury Park has some of the cleanest water. Maybe that is true. But the reality is we live in a county with a great deal of industrial exploitation, be it mine tailings, U.S. magnesium. There's a lot of reasons to have concern for the safety of our water. And I think it's really important that we take more measures to protect our water as well and reduce industrial exploitation. That still doesn't address our concerns of not having water, which, really it comes down to conservation and growth management is the way I see we tackle that.
I would say conservation and growth management is a good way of putting it. There was a study conducted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it showed that approximately 70% of all water in the average U.S. household is used on lawns. We are so wasteful. We live in a desert. It's not even a matter of a drought. We live in a desert. We can't have this tropical grass that everybody loves. And I get it. It's nice and it's comfy and you can walk on it. Awesome. But how much of that lawn do you actually use? When you're barbecuing, how much of that lawn do you actually walk out on? Start considering that in your day-to-day life. And start getting rid of the patches of lawn and replacing them with, xeriscaping, some sort of xeriscaping where you either astroturf if you really want that green lawn, or you can, use rocks and use the natural beauty of the desert to get there. Another thing I see is a lot of people cut their lawn very, very short. That doesn't trap the moisture, so it just dries out. I'm not a landscaping expert by any means, but when the statistics show that 70% of the average household consumption of water is spent on a plant that doesn't even produce for us, by that I mean do anything useful, it's discouraging. I'd probably encourage that if there is future development, that the development somehow write into their CCNRs that there will be xeriscaping efforts, zero waterscaping efforts to conserve on water. So that way, if you intend to purchase a home, you can only have a smaller lawn. And I know that's kind of against my whole thing, being the liberty guy and do whatever you want so long as you're not hurting anybody. But in reality, we live in a desert, so you are hurting somebody. You're hurting your neighbor, because when the water's gone, everybody's gone, And then I heard on Facebook a lot of these complaints about them taking water out of the reservoir to put out a fire. Just have some priorities. We need to have some priorities here. Oh, I got more restrictions because I got more restrictions and my grass isn't green this week because there's a fire. Okay, your problem is there's a fire over there. Somebody's going to lose their house.
That is a silly gripe.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
So the Department of Natural Resources there in downtown Salt Lake actually did some studies out in this area throughout the years. And they decided, or they said that there was 3 distinct watersheds in just this valley that we're at right now. Not all of Tooele County, but just in the valley we're here. And one of those being down in Lake Point being its own individual one. Then there's the one that Stansbury's incorporated, and there was one other. Water is a definite issue here because we don't have enough water to support the growth that we're trying to put in, type thing. However, with that said, one of the neighbors that I had for many years in Lake Point actually designed their own water system. They were a hydrologist. They did their own lawn. They have a little bit more lawn than the normal houses on their street. And yet they use sufficiently minuscule amounts of water for that because they knew how to design it correctly. And that's what we need to also focus on, is actually getting the correct design in place for people. And that's something that's a personal responsibility. So as we go out there, realize we are in the desert, like you said, and that we have an obligation. If we're going to put something out there, we're going to have to sit there and decide what's going to be the best way to feed it. For me, I'm on a private well, but I understand the water situation, and so I don't water too much. I water my plants that give me food, and my trees are well established, and so I don't even put water on them, and they do just fine, type thing. It takes a while to get a tree established like that, but once it is, you're good to go, just with the rainfall and things like that. So there's lots of clever ways that we can take care of that issue. But it's a concern, and yeah, we need to manage the growth out here as well, just like you guys said.
Sounds like your neighbor should start a YouTube channel on how to. That would be something I would watch. I'm very interested in
It
learning
would
how to
be
conserve.
great, but he moved up north, so
Did he? Well, he'll be able to grow more grass that way, that's for sure. Okay, so our next question is from Gail on Facebook. What is your stance on voter ID laws? Great question. Brennan.
All right. I would be an advocate for automatic voter registration, and people are already registered to vote. Where you would automatically be registered when you turn 18, and we live in a by mail ballot county, so you would automatically be registered, and your ballot would be mailed to you. There would never even be a need for an ID. However, some people prefer to go into polling locations and vote in person. Most of us have an ID, but some don't, and some have difficulties getting access to an ID. I feel those people should still have a means of voting. I understand that we need to verify their identity at the poll. If there's someone comes in and they want to vote and they don't have their ID on them, I feel that they should be allowed to fill out a provisional ballot until we can verify their identity. But ideally, I would think we would have a system where you wouldn't even need your ID to vote, that you would be automatically registered and you would receive your ballot in the mail.
Justin?
I do like the idea of automatic voter registration. I mean, we do live in a representative republic, so it's important to vote. It kind of showcases a lot of problems with politics in the United States when we have voter turnouts as low as they are. I think the Republican primary was less than 30% in Tooele County, which is just crazy. Less than 30% of people registered to vote showed up. Or less than 30% of registered Republicans, even not even necessarily registered to vote, registered Republicans failed to show up. But I think the major issue with the voter ID system is a lot of people are concerned about fraud. I get it. You don't want election fraud. That makes sense. But if we actually look at the data, very little election fraud occurs, and I believe that presenting ID, anything, driver's license, social security card, don't care. Presenting that should be enough.
Thank you. Jonathan?
So we've been in the home that we're currently living in for 6 years now. And the resident that lived there prior to us has now passed away. And even this last election cycle, we received their by-mail ballot for us in that area. So there's a cost associated for every single by-mail ballot that's sent out there. And the voter ID laws that we've passed, where it's vote by mail, has changed the game just a little bit. If you can remember back a long time ago, when we didn't have the by mail option, we actually went to a voting precinct, a local precinct. There was people there that knew who we were. that's how they verified that we were who we were. We could have showed some identification at that time as well, but they actually knew us because they were our neighbors. They knew who we were. If we didn't have our license with us, they're like, oh yeah, I know him. And there was a representative from each of the political parties that could be an election judge. And so our state, the Utah State Legislature, actually changed it to allow by-mail balloting. Out there in Lake Point, we were show up at the voter polls, and all of a sudden we got changed to by-mail a lot sooner than everybody else did. And we went to find out about that because you had to have a district that was small. And we found out that unbeknownst to us, the county actually changed our boundaries so that they split us into 2 different voting precincts without a map so that they could, by law, legally say that we were a by-mail ballot only. And so I've seen some fraud actually happen in that regard, in the way that they notified the residents that that was changing. And then the notifications that they did send out, we never received the first notification. When we received the second notification, and this was the whole town of Lake Point, when we received the second notification, they said it was too late to change it back to actually having a polling location. One last thing on the by-mail versus polling location is a polling location gives you a set date where you're going to go, and all the dirt or all the benefits of all the candidates is everybody's on a level playing field when they go to the ballot box. We're going to start voting, in October now? When we get our ballots, somebody will fill it out as soon as they do it. Wait a couple more weeks till November, and something new comes about, and they're like, oh no, I voted for the wrong person because I didn't know this was going to happen. You're going to see that more and more as we switch over to this by-mail balloting.
All right. So, to piggyback on that, Justin, you're an IT guy. Do you see a future option where we'll be able to use maybe like a common access card as a civilian member of Tooele County, kind of the way they do in the military with the little chips on them, where we can just vote on the internet? Is that a possibility that you see in the nearby future?
Not a CAC card, because there's a physical cost associated. I would say blockchain technology looks very promising. The problem is a lot of people don't understand the blockchain yet. We're currently using, or at least developing, a platform in the Libertarian Party to accept votes by blockchain. And the beauty is that it is 100% basically tamper-proof. When incursions do occur, they can be audited easily. That's the true beauty of blockchain. A lot of people don't understand. I don't want to get into a whole blockchain rant, but about Bitcoin is you can audit it. You don't have to ask a central bank to go, hey, do these numbers look right? A person with the knowledge could go and audit every single transaction on the blockchain. You could do the same thing with the voting registration. I believe that's a beautiful thing because you can have open and fair elections that are basically tamper-proof. And if there's ever a call to question, the people can ask. And the people can, by themselves, dictate whether the election was rigged.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should do that in some of these countries. Just saying. Some of these countries with the elections that are actually 100% rigged.
I agree. Blockchain technology is 100%. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jonathan. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, with the blockchain, so like police love that because they can actually track the money when they use Bitcoin and things like that to exactly where it went with the blockchain technology. However, on the voter side of that, would they be able to determine who I'm voting for? Would I lose my privacy at that point?
That's possible.
Where they could trace it back and say, hey, this person's been supporting this person, this person, this person, this person, and now my data is at risk. My right to vote has now just been intercepted by a group.
You could develop in such a way that the votes are anonymized, but the actual fact that you cast a ballot is not anonymous.
Okay.
So there are different ways to do that. And that's the study that's occurring. I believe they've actually had a couple of votes already with blockchain in place. And the Republican Party held their state convention here with blockchain technology. So it must have been rigged and Romney got it.
Well, I do look forward to the day I can pay my taxes in Bitcoin. That would be nice. So the next question is from multiple sources. This was a pretty popular question, and we've talked about it previously in this debate. Do you have a plan of action for the sale of the Larry Miller Raceway that won't end in controversy or legal disputes? Pretty appropriate question for Tooele County.
Let
Brandon?
me say, I just hope to God that by November it's sold already, and that we don't have to deal with it. Because this has been ongoing for so long, and they're doing the bidding right now. They've already extended the bidding twice in the past 3 months. Like, I'm just hoping that by the time that we come in office, this is done and we don't have to deal with it. Because if it's not, I mean, then what are we doing? The deadline was July 2nd. Our commissioners had 30 days after that to come out with a report, and then they extended the deadline. And then they extended the deadline again. And you know what? Let's just get it over with. So, if this falls into our lap, that's really unfortunate. I hope to God this is done by November.
I like that answer. Justin?
I can agree with that sentiment too a little bit. I would say this probably, well, I mean, if it happened like it should have, won't be an issue for us. I do believe that the Larry H. Miller Sports Park, Deseret Peak, whatever we're calling it now, I think it's still technically legally Deseret Peak Complex, is sold. And honestly, I hope that they were smart enough with this one to sell it without any legal issues. But unfortunately, it probably won't.
So much confidence.
Yeah, so much confidence in our current commission. I get it, but there's a lot of legal loopholes and there's a lot that could go wrong. I don't want to speculate too much on what could go wrong, but I would say that no matter what, we still need to get that off of the. We need to make that no longer be a burden of the people. We need to get rid of it and hope that it stays, because at this point it's hemorrhaging so much money. It's ridiculous, and hopefully the plan for it in the future is that the private company that takes it over, whatever company it may be, likes money, and they develop it in such a way that it makes money, so that way we can make money.
Exactly. Jonathan?
So with the racetrack, when they were first selling it, there was already laws in place that governed exactly how they should have taken care of it. And the problem was our current commissioners did not follow those laws. They sat there and they said, oh, well, the highest bidder, because that's what the law said, the highest bidder gets the thing. And they're like, no, but they're not going to do what we want them to do. Well, that's not our decision to make. The laws were already in place, and that's why we got a slap on our wrist. It was more than a slap on our wrist. It was a lawsuit, and we're paying out money because of that. And I think that's ridiculous. But that's done. That's done. I can't do anything more about that. So yes, I hope that they actually follow the law this next time and they sell it in accordance to our laws. Here in the county, it seems like occasionally they're not following the laws. If you go to any of the county commissioner meetings, if you go to any of the planning and zoning commission meetings, if you're actually paying attention to what's going on in the county, you'll find many different instances where there's a law on the book and we choose just to disregard it. And that was another case where they just chose to disregard a law. And it's funny that the ones that they choose to disregard usually benefit them in some way and not the public.
Yeah, I was talking about this with my wife today, actually. And, we talked about how the law is enforced selectively. And, it's pretty clear that what happened, they broke the law when they did the bidding process. But for whatever reason, they weren't upheld to that standard. However, now we see petitioners being prosecuted for not obeying the law. So which way does it go? Are we, our county attorney said, well, we have to follow the letter of the law and prosecute these petitioners. But, that doesn't work both ways. So it doesn't seem fair to me.
To that point, there's something called prosecutory discretion. It's the reason a lot of things elsewhere aren't enforced very well, like the federal mandate on the ban of marijuana in Colorado. There's prosecutor discretion, so it's a nasty game, and it's almost sickening. But I hope that regardless of who gets in to the commission seat, that they're not just puppets. And that's about as far as I'm going to go with that statement. You can make up the rest, and you can speculate what I'm talking about.
Well, I will say this. It's hard to believe that it's this hard to sell a piece of real estate. Our government shouldn't even be in the business of operating businesses. And that should have been a huge red flag for our previous commissioners when they started going into this venture. And let alone, now it falls onto the lap of the current commissioners, and we still, through this bureaucratic system that we have, this selective law system, we still can't even get this thing off the books, and we're paying for it. And I'll tell you what, as a citizen, I'm a little hot under the collar about this issue. I always spoke out against the race park. I didn't think it was a very good purchase. Just morally, from my perspective of government not doing business and competing with the private class on those type of issues. Absolutely. So if one of you do get in, please get it sold. Get it sold. Our next question. Parks and recreation. What is your opinion on the city providing such amenities to the public? So, should we be spending tax dollars on parks and recreation centers? Brennan.
I think so, yes. Ideally, I live in Stansbury Park. I would see Stansbury Park incorporate and manage our own parks. Tooele County, it's we operate on a different level than municipally or in a city. I would like to see a county rec center. I would like to see a county trails system. I would like to see more places where I could do outdoor recreation with our family. I do think our county has some role in that. We have a Department of Parks and Recreation. Mark McKendrick's awesome, by the way. Shout out to Mark. Absolutely, I think that's a role. I think our government has a role in providing parks and recreation to our community.
Okay, Justin.
My perspective on this is most of the parks that exist in the county are governed at the level of HOAs or special committees, depending on the level. For example, in South Rim, the park that exists there is governed by the same board that governs South Rim as a special zoning district, I believe they call them. South Willow Estates and Grantsville, I believe, operates where the HOA takes care of the parks, and the land was basically gifted during development. I believe the responsibility for parks should lay heavily on the community that they're in, not necessarily the county. I believe the county should be able to appropriate lands occasionally if they're under the county's purview, not bulldozing somebody's house through eminent domain, and gift that land to a community in order to build their own park. But I don't believe the county should be personally supervising every park, no.
Jonathan.
You're talking about a special service district.
Yeah, I think I corrected myself there at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Special
So
service district.
Special service district, yeah, that's exactly the way that government is supposed to be working. In the sense that the individual has the most rights. We have all rights, actually, and we delegate a few of these to different levels of government. The first one being that of our family. So we become a part of a family, and so we delegate some of our responsibilities and the things that we have. We can pull together resources. We can put a swing set in our own yard if we choose to, whatever it may be. Then we go out one more step. We're going into those HOAs or into the community type thing. From that point, you actually go out into the cities, into the government, county government level. Then you go to the state, and then all the way up to national, federal and national. As you're doing that, though, you have to remember every time you go up a level of government, there's more overhead. It takes more of your tax dollar that goes away to pay all the people in between, up the chain and then back down for all the decisions that are made. And so we need to manage our parks and recreation at the most local level that we possibly can. I think it's great that the HOAs are doing it. I think that's a very okay area to do it. I worked for a builder many years ago that actually, he was well off. And what he did is he put in a neighborhood park and he maintains it for the kids in his community, just so that they would have a place to play ball instead of in the street. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's able to do that, but there's thinking outside of the box, which doesn't require government to get involved. We do a lot of good things on our own. We're a good people here in Tooele County, and we can pass that along and we can teach others to do the same thing.
I agree. All right, so we'll finish up with the last question here. And this question is from Michael on Facebook. How will you take into consideration the needs and desires of the local residents before making adjustments to zoning? So here's our zoning question. And I'll start with you, Brendan. Go ahead.
I really like this question. I think this is really, really important. I think one of the biggest complaints I hear from people in Tooele County is that they don't feel like they're included or heard in these sort of issues. That, public comments opened after, the items already voted on, that people don't get an opportunity, that, items are placed on the agenda and then, they're bumped back and meetings are canceled. And, people, it's really hard for people to know what's going on, when it's going on, when they're supposed to be there. And, our commissioners kind of operate in this shadow, and people don't really know what they're doing and who they're talking to. I think it's really important for our commissioners to be accessible, to be transparent, for them to pick up their phone, for them to respond to your email. I think it's important that when an issue like this comes up, where there's a hot button zoning issue and the community comes out in big numbers to speak out against it, that they're given an opportunity to voice that, where they'll be heard. That's not in our commission meetings. It should be. Our public should be able to go into those commission meetings and voice their concerns, but oftentimes they're allowed to voice them after it's over, or they're disregarded by our commissioners. I would like to see, when one of these zoning issues comes up, perhaps even our commissioners open up, host a forum for the community to come in and give their feedback on it, and not just in a commissioner meeting, but a public forum that's publicly posted with good advance notice so people can get there. I think the most important thing a county commissioner can do is represent their constituency, be open, be transparent, be communicative. And I haven't felt like our commissioners have been that. And I think that's a really important quality that I would hope to carry into the office.
Justin?
In regards to zoning, I think one thing should be for certain. Yes, the county makes most of its money off of property taxes. So that is why the county is incentivized to allow these large zoning boards to come in, or large zoning situations to occur where a developer comes in. So I understand that necessity, for them at least. I think one thing we should do is make sure there's this concept in business where early adopters are rewarded more. Early adopters of technologies are rewarded more because that allowed the business to grow. And I think that something very similar could occur with in regards to zoning. For example, in future zoning rules, for homes built after the rule kicks in, you would mandate some level of what is the term I'm looking for here, Brendan? You use
Grandfather clause or something?
Yeah, no, a grandfather clause, but for the water situation, zero turfing. Zero scaping. So some sort of, rule that there's zero scaping. And the people that currently have their lawns can sit and enjoy them, and the future people, when they come in, clearly have the understanding that their lawn is going to be a zero-scaped lawn, or that there are going to be restrictions on their water use to protect those that are already here. So you protect the early adopters, and I understand, there's this whole thing about the equal distribution of law. That would technically be equal under the way laws are written. So you would do something like that. In regards to community outreach with the commission, I feel that it's a travesty that people are asked their opinion after the vote has been conducted, and the only real way to get them to reconsider their decision before the meeting even happens is to basically prove to them that there's some sort of legal problem. That's the only way a lot of these things get removed, is somebody mentions that there's a legal problem, and then all of a sudden the commissioner snap to it and go like, oh, they're going to catch us if we vote for it now. So that's a situation that we need to take into consideration. Will we have more opportunity to speak? Is that the final question, or do we have a closing statement?
Well, I'll definitely give you guys an opportunity to do a closing statement.
In that case, then I'll move it on.
Jonathan.
All right. So this is a big issue. I'm up at the Planning and Zoning Commissions occasionally, and I see this coming up all the time. They've changed the way that they do things at the Planning and Zoning Commissions. They've opted for a streamlined approach to actually get things pushed right through, type thing. So they sit there and they give you a little document on your chair when you get up there, and it sits there and it says you can't make any comment, you can't clap, you can't do really anything. It's all silent type thing. They want to make it so the commissioners, the planning and zoning commissioners, are going to be able to get home at some point in some time. And so they limit the public comment for one person up there each time for 2 minutes, and they have the opportunity to say, hey, we've already heard that, and you don't need to tell us the same thing that we've already heard. But I think that's really dangerous, because the way I tell something is different than the way that Justin does, which is different than the way that Brendan does, which is different than what you tell it, David. And, as you're doing that, that's where we're having a fall down in the thing. It's like a developer will get up there and give their proposal of what they're going to do for their land development or their zoning change, and they'll get to speak for 20, 25, 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. We have some people that are really knowledgeable on the codes and the laws, and they've researched them out, and they have maybe 5 minutes of material to give, and they only get 2. And so we don't hear the other 3 minutes. And it also sparks ideas with the rest of the public as the people are up there. And so how do we address that? How do we address those needs and desires of the people that are living here already? We actually have to go out and mingle with people. We have to go and talk to them. We need to, I liked how you said the open forum type thing. Have an open forum. That sounds like a really good thing. To be able to talk to the community members. More so than, they'll always give you the option. I can send an email. Well, do you guys ever get to read the emails and the points that I put in my emails? Do you see them? They're not available. Or you have to do a lot of research to find them, because they do become part of the public record, but it's after the fact. When you're in a live meeting and you're actually talking about it then, you have a great number of ideas. So Congress, a long time ago, between the Senate and the House back there in Washington, D.C., the reason they passed things from one house to the other house is because government shouldn't be streamlined. We need to think about these things. These things affect us on a daily basis, and we need to really think and be critical. So they compared it to having a hot cup of coffee. If you sip it right at the very beginning, you're going to burn your mouth. And so they compared it to pouring that coffee to one cup, to the other cup, to the other cup, to the other cup, and eventually it becomes lukewarm. We're able to enjoy it, type thing, and it's a good thing. It's a good result. Same thing here. We need more time on these issues. We don't need to push them through. Streamlining for businesses is great. Streamlining for zoning changes and things like that is not so good.
Fantastic. So that brings us to the end of our debate. Citizen debate is now over for Chair A of Tooele County, and I would like to give you guys an opportunity to give a closing statement. Brandon?
All right. So, when I came into this today, I was honestly kind of nervous. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm a Green Party candidate in Tooele County, and I was a little scared. But I feel really good now. And I gotta say, that's actually partially because of these guys. Because we have 3 candidates up here who don't represent the major parties. They're not Democrats, they're not Republicans. These are people with backbone who aren't afraid to ruffle some feathers. And we've dealt with a lot with our county commission over the past few years. And after this experience and sitting at this table with these guys, I'm really excited. We have an opportunity to get someone in office who is different, who's willing to ruffle some feathers. And these guys, man, they know their stuff. You guys are smart. You guys are members of our community. You guys are real people. You guys aren't intellectual suits up on a mansion on the side of the hill.
Dang.
And I respect the hell out of that. So, whatever you do in November, vote for who you think's the best. I think you've got a lot of choices. I'm really excited that we have 4 choices on the ballot this year, offering a variety of perspectives. And I would just say, do your research, and, if you want to vote for me, that's great. But if you don't, you've got some other really good choices too. So, thank goodness for people like this that are willing to put themselves out there and run for the office. I have much respect for these guys, and, hopefully you'll vote for me, but if you vote for Justin, if you vote for Jonathan, I respect that too.
Thank you. Justin?
Well, thank you. I'm taken aback. Same to you. Same kudos to you. I was actually kind of surprised, to be fair. Although I haven't read much on your policy, I had expectations of the Green Party that were slightly different. David can attest to that.
Well, we call them watermelons, right?
Green on the outside, red in the
on
middle. And some of them have black seeds in them too.
That's how they populate.
I like that term, by the way. I don't know what I was going to say.
So, I believe that this election is very important, especially seat A. We don't have a Democrat in the race, so for us third parties, the argument we always hear is, well, if we vote for you, the Democrat will win. And I absolutely hate that argument, because if everybody that said that to me actually went and voted for for what they actually believed in, we would actually have probably a really good president, and probably really good representatives all around. Not to toot my own horn there on the third party thing. I love third party politics. One thing that really upsets me with the county is the lack of transparency. You can go get a grammar request, sure, but you have to fill out paperwork to be transparent. That's a little bit much. I understand there are certain things that have to be confidential. That makes sense. But anything that doesn't have to be confidential should be public record. That's how we operate. And a lot of this experience is internal party workings with the Libertarian Party. You can go to, I believe it's archive.lp.org, and literally look at any email anybody has sent inside the party, as long as it isn't something that's considered personal. Something that isn't considered somebody's personal information. I think that's really how government needs to operate as a whole. We need to be completely and wholeheartedly transparent in our interactions. Obviously, we need to protect some people's rights. They have a right to privacy. So maybe not every email gets out there, but You can request at the end of an email chain, hey, do you mind if I make this public? And I'm sure most people wouldn't object. So something like that could work great. In regards to the public comment issue that we've faced time and time again tonight, I think every single vote should be open to public comment. The rule in parliamentary procedure is if a meeting is going too long, end the meeting at the end of meeting time and table whatever you were voting on until the next meeting. That's how it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to streamline things, especially when it comes to government. It's very important. I would say that there's a lot that you can do with parliamentary procedure. I learned parliamentary procedure, or at least through observation, from a master of parliamentary procedure. His unofficial title is professional cat herder. He's the chair of the Libertarian Party, and if you ever seen Nicholas Sarwark run a meeting, it gets intense because basically a lot of things go with no objection. Okay, moving on. It's efficient, but it allows people to voice their concerns. Parliamentary procedure is there as a way of making the body in order. So as long as there's discussion happening, it holds, and the discussion goes on. If there's no discussion happening, just make it move. A lot of things could be handled in public comment. When they say, they give developers 30, 40 minutes, that's because the developer has been asked to give a presentation. To be fair to the developers, they are asked by the commission to give a presentation to not only inform the commission, but also inform the audience of what's going on. But when it comes to public comment, I think everybody's voice should be heard. If you hear the same thing getting repeated again and again, just say, hey, raise your hand if you share that concern. Okay, does anybody have anything to add to those concerns? And that way you get a general sense of the crowd. But I really do look forward to this November, well, really October, because everybody's going to get their ballots and just turn them in easy. Which, by the way, complicates things, because if you're on a third-party style budget, all your advertising is at the end. And making that end a 3-week stretch is a little difficult. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the polls, and I wish Mr. Tripp would have been able to make it. I understand he had some sort of previous obligation to why he couldn't be here tonight. I really look forward to debating him in the future. I believe we all do, considering he's apparently the challenger here because he has that big R next to his name that makes him special.
Especially Republican. Jonathan.
All right. So I have to tell you, a couple of years ago I did a Master Gardener class through the USU Extension here in Tooele County. And it was a wonderful thing. You learn a lot of great things there. And one of them is weed identification. And there's one little weed that is like my nemesis in this county, and it's the goat head. I don't know if you've seen them, but the funny thing about the goat head is when it first starts to grow, it's just really minuscule. It's really tiny. It has like one set of leaves that branches off, and you have to be really clever at looking at it and finding it to know where it's at. It's really easy to remove it right at the beginning. You wait a little bit, it starts to grow 3 little branches, then it goes up to 5, then 7. Then it starts shooting these runners out. Then it starts forming these seeds. Each one of these flowers becomes 5 goat heads, all clustered together. And as soon as they're on there, it doesn't matter if you pick them because they start to fall off, they dry, and they reseed themselves. And so if you miss one goat head in a particular spot, you can expect to have hundreds of goat heads in their place. If you miss a couple of them, 3 or 4, you're going to be up to 10,000 goat heads that are in there. The reason I bring this up is because while we're out there voting, we have to be careful of who we're actually putting into office. We need to know that plant. We need to know the idea of what it is and what it's going to produce. I've seen repeatedly here in Tooele County that we put commissioners in place, and they just looked like a little harmless little plant. It was just small and tender. It was just ready to grow, and it had all these wonderful ideas. And then as it started to go, it started throwing a thorn here and a thorn here and a thorn here. And then it mucked it up for the rest of us. It really bothered us. we have issues because of it. We have South Rim. We have the development that's down there in Stansbury by the sledding kill. We have all of these different things that are happening on a county level. All of those are just those little goat heads being spread out there. What we have to do is pay attention to them. When we see them, grab onto them, and it hurts to grab onto those things. Take them out, and then be careful not to put anything back in its place. Because I almost had my entire garden spot of one of my properties entirely free of goat heads. And it came about that somebody had left the water on a few times in the middle of the night, and what they had watered was their garden and the goat heads. And so I ended up with, you see this table here, goat heads would overrun this table. I'm sure there is more like 30, 40, 50,000 goat heads there. I have to start over from square one. I don't want to have to do that here in Tooele County. I've ran for office before. I've ran for county commissioner before. Here in Tooele County, I've ran with the Constitution Party. And as I do it, I keep on saying to the people the same thing. If you want something different, you have to do something different. If you don't do something different, you're not going to get anything different. We keep on putting in the people with the special letters at the end of their name, and we end up, after a couple of months or a year, that they start doing the same things. We start to actually see the fruit or the seeds that are coming onto them, and they hurt. They hurt our county. And so, yeah, come November, look us up. Before November, look us up. Right now is the time to do your research and talk to everybody. Tell them if you liked what we were saying, and share our names out there. I think you can find all of us on Facebook. Some of us have campaign websites. We have a lot of information that we didn't cover here, and just go look us up. I appreciate you, David, for hosting this. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming. I do appreciate the company, and it was a short-term invite, so thank you for also inconveniencing yourselves on this wonderful Sunday, and I hope it was helpful.
Definitely.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this concludes